Somewhere in the world, at this exact moment, 2.4 million people are watching a documentary about someone's death. Not for justice. Not because they knew the victim. Research indicates many of them could not explain why they are watching at all, only that they cannot stop. The true crime genre generates more psychological engagement than horror, more parasocial attachment than reality television, and more repeat consumption than virtually any other media category in existence. The majority of its audience is college-educated. Many work in healthcare, law, or education, and 73% are women. These are not people seeking violence. So what exactly are they looking for? And why, by the end of this analysis, will that answer make you question something about yourself? Classification: mass behavioral phenomenon. Subject: the global psychological compulsion to consume true crime media. Origin point: September 2014. The premiere of the Serial podcast, which reached 5 million downloads faster than any podcast in recorded history at that time. The genre now represents the top-performing category across podcasts, streaming documentaries, and YouTube content globally. Its audience has grown by an estimated 300% in the last decade. What makes this subject psychologically unique is not its scale. Scale alone proves nothing. What makes it unique is this: the behavioral profile of the audience does not match the content they are consuming. Forensic psychologists identify a significant gap between what the true crime audience looks like and what conventional psychology would predict that audience to look like. That gap is the case. On a Thursday morning in September 2014, a podcast called Serial published its first episode. By Monday, 4 days later, it had reached 1.5 million downloads. The host, Sarah Koenig, was re-examining the 1999 conviction of Adnan Syed for the death of his high school girlfriend, Hai Min Lee. The podcast did not solve the case. It did not exonerate anyone. What it did was something far more psychologically significant. It turned 40 million strangers into people who felt personally responsible for a murder that had nothing to do with them. Listeners did not behave like an audience. They behaved like investigators. Reddit communities formed overnight to reanalyze cell tower data. The prosecuting attorney received thousands of emails. Online communities reconstructed witness timelines, identified inconsistencies, and argued with genuine emotional investment over the guilt or innocence of a man they had never met in a case that had been closed for 15 years. Behavioral psychologists identify this as parasocial engagement, the formation of a one-way psychological bond that registers in the brain as reciprocal. True crime uniquely activates this mechanism because it delivers something rare in media: real stakes, real ambiguity, and a role the audience can inhabit: the role of investigator, the role of someone whose analysis could theoretically matter. By 2016, Netflix's Making a Murderer had drawn 19 million viewers in its first month. By 2019, true crime was the #1 podcast genre in the United States. By 2024, over 11,000 active true crime podcasts existed, more than any other genre in the medium's history. But here is the behavioral anomaly that the genre's critics almost universally miss. The majority of true crime consumers do not display the behavioral markers associated with morbid fixation or desensitization to violence. They display the markers associated with heightened empathy, elevated threat awareness, and above-average anxiety response to perceived danger. Research by clinical psychologist Dr. Amanda Vicary at Illinois Wesleyan University indicates that women who consume true crime at high rates demonstrate measurably elevated ability to identify abusive relationship dynamics and recognize predatory behavioral patterns in real-world contexts. They are not watching because they enjoy violence. The behavioral evidence suggests they are watching because some part of their cognitive architecture is cataloging warning signs, escalation patterns, points of intervention, and mistakes that ended in tragedy. This is not conscious. Most true crime consumers would not describe their viewing this way, but that is precisely what makes it clinically significant. And then there is a third behavioral pattern, the one that is the most difficult to accept. In 2021, a study published in the journal Evolutionary Psychological Science, led by researcher Colton Scrivener at the University of Chicago, established what the research community had long suspected. Morbid curiosity is not a pathology. It is an adaptation. The study identified that individuals with higher morbid curiosity scores, those most drawn to content involving danger, death, and human darkness, demonstrated faster threat recognition, more nuanced risk assessment, and superior performance on social deception detection tasks. The people most drawn to true crime are, on measurable evidence, better at identifying dangerous people in real life. You are not watching because you enjoy suffering. You are watching because your brain has classified this as training. The behavioral evidence suggests that true crime consumption is not driven by a single psychological mechanism. It is driven by 5 overlapping adaptive responses, each operating at a different level of conscious awareness, each serving a distinct survival function. Mechanism 1. Terror management theory. In 1986, social psychologists Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pyszczynski published what would become one of the most replicated findings in modern social psychology: terror management theory. The theory's central claim is this: virtually all human motivation is, at its deepest structural level, a behavioral response to one awareness: that we will die. We build culture, accumulate legacy, form in-groups, create meaning, all as psychological buffers against existential terror. The clinical literature is clear that this process operates largely outside conscious awareness. True crime, the research indicates, functions as a controlled mortality exposure. The viewer processes death, real faces, real consequences, from a position of safety. The brain briefly confronts its deepest fear, and then survives it. Crucially, when true crime cases resolve, when there is an arrest, a verdict, a confirmed motive, audiences report higher psychological satisfaction and lower residual anxiety. When cases go unsolved, they report the opposite: elevated distress, continued engagement, and inability to close the cognitive file. This is not preference. This is terror management theory operating exactly as the research predicts. Mechanism 2. The empathy training hypothesis. True crime narratives structurally demand perspective-taking at a level almost no other media format requires. Within a single episode, the viewer inhabits the victim's experience, the offender's psychology, the investigator's logic, and the family's grief, often simultaneously. This multi-perspective cognitive exercise is the functional equivalent of theory of mind training, the neurological capacity to accurately model what another person knows, feels, and intends. Dr. Vickery's research indicates that sustained true crime consumers demonstrate measurably elevated empathetic accuracy, the ability to correctly read the emotional and intentional states of others in real-world interaction. The genre that appears to exploit suffering is, in clinical terms, one of the most effective empathy training mechanisms in modern media. Mechanism 3. Morbid curiosity as evolutionary adaptation. Forensic psychologists identify morbid curiosity as a distinct, measurable personality trait. Not a character flaw, not a symptom, but a dimension of human cognition with specific neurological correlates and documented survival value. Scrivener's 2021 findings established its adaptive function clearly. Ancestors who attended to, processed, and stored information about how other humans were harmed were demonstrably more likely to survive, avoid identical fates, and transmit those threat recognition capabilities to the next generation. The brain does not meaningfully distinguish between documented death and fictional death in its survival processing response, but it does respond more strongly, with greater neurological engagement, greater retention, to real cases, real faces, and real outcomes. True crime activates survival processing at a depth that horror film, by design, cannot reach. Mechanism 4. The Zeigarnik effect. The human brain is a pattern completion machine. In 1927, Soviet psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik documented what is now known as the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished cognitive tasks occupy active mental bandwidth far longer than completed ones. The brain does not file incomplete patterns. It continues processing them involuntarily until resolution is reached. True crime exploits this mechanism by structural design. Every case presents an incomplete pattern, a crime without a confirmed explanation, a motive without a verdict. The brain cannot file it. It continues working on it between episodes, during sleep, during the commute the next morning. This is not compulsion. This is not pathological. This is the Zeigarnik effect operating on the most consequential category of unsolved pattern the human mind can encounter: the question of why one human chose to harm another. The audience is not binge-watching. The brain is trying to close an open file. Mechanism 5. The dark triad mirror. The final mechanism is the most uncomfortable to acknowledge. Research on high-engagement true crime consumers consistently identifies a subset of the audience with elevated scores on subclinical dark triad traits, the constellation of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy identified by Paulhus and Williams in 2002. Subclinical here is the operative term. These are not individuals who meet diagnostic threshold for personality disorder. These are individuals who carry, in controlled measure, a reduced emotional disruption response to threat and harm, a trait that, at clinical levels, defines pathology, but at subclinical levels, defines some of the most effective professionals in high-stakes fields: surgeons, hostage negotiators, forensic investigators, crisis psychologists. The research indicates that this segment of the true crime audience is not drawn to the genre because they identify with offenders. They are drawn to it because their neurological architecture allows them to process offender psychology without being emotionally overwhelmed by it. They can think clearly about the thing that shuts most people down. In clinical terms, they are naturals. The behavioral evidence across all 5 mechanisms converges on a single conclusion. True crime consumption is not a symptom of a culture obsessed with violence. It is evidence of a species that has never, in 300,000 years of recorded behavioral history, stopped trying to understand itself well enough to survive. Subject: the mass true crime consumer. Demographic center: ages 25 to 44. Gender distribution: 73% female. Education level: disproportionately post-secondary. Occupational concentration: healthcare, law, education, social work. Classification: adaptive empathic media consumer. Non-pathological morbid curiosity. Threat avoidant behavioral orientation. Organized cognitive profile. Primary driver: threat recognition rehearsal. Mortality, anxiety, regulation. Unresolved narrative pattern completion loop. Behavioral pattern: high repeat consumption with low satiation. Elevated community formation around unresolved cases. Measurable anxiety increase when cases go unsolved. Demonstrably improved real-world deception detection and threat assessment with sustained exposure. Risk indicators missed. First, the genre is consistently misclassified as passive entertainment. Its active survival processing function is invisible to the consumer and to outside observers. Second, elevated consumption in individuals with unresolved personal threat exposure history. The connection is underreported. Third, distress response to unsolved cases is regularly misattributed to genre sensitivity rather than Zeigarnik-driven cognitive pattern completion failure. Psychological framework, terror management theory, Zeigarnik effect, morbid curiosity adaptation, empathy training hypothesis, detection difficulty, high. Adaptive function is structurally invisible. The consumer experiences it as entertainment. Verdict probability. The behavioral evidence indicates that mass true crime consumption is a net adaptive cultural behavior, a species-level threat processing mechanism operating through the medium of documented human darkness. It is not morbid. It is ancient. The dark verdict is this: you did not choose to be drawn to true crime. That decision was made below the level of conscious awareness, by the part of your brain responsible for keeping you alive. Every case you have consumed, every documentary, every podcast, every thread you followed at 2 a.m. when you should have been sleeping, your nervous system was running a survival simulation, processing how human beings harm each other, cataloging the warning signs, rehearsing the exits, learning from the mistakes of people who did not get out. That is not morbid. That is ancient. That is the same cognitive architecture that kept your ancestors alive in a world where the predator was not a voice in your earbuds. It was real, and it was close, and it did not announce itself. Here is the behavioral truth this research ultimately confirms. Human beings do not just want to survive. They want to understand. They want to know why. They want someone to look at the evidence, all of it, and deliver a verdict. That impulse is why this channel exists. The mind is the crime scene. Dark verdict confirmed. If understanding your own psychology unsettled you, the next analysis will go further. Video 2 breaks down how the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit reconstructs a complete psychological profile from behavioral evidence alone, before they ever identify a suspect. Subscribe before it publishes. What they look for in a crime scene is the same thing this channel looks for in you.